On the 8th of March 2020, Melbourne celebrated International Women's Day in true Melbourneian fashion. 85,000 plus attended the MCG for the International Cricket Council's Women's World Cup T20 final. Australia's women emerged victorious over India. And for many in that stadium, and for Australian sports fans throughout the country, an autumn carnival of sport at community and elite level stretched ahead. Within a week, Formula One's opening Grand Prix, to be held at Melbourne's Albert Park, was cancelled. Within that week, the devastating public health impact of the coronavirus was now having an impact on sport itself. In the US, during that week, the most commercially ruthless of sporting leagues, the National Basketball Association, suspended and cancelled games and eventually its season because a player tested positive for the virus. Sport began globally to shut down, and it has remained so. There are evidently obvious and important reasons why sport must remain closed: for the health and protection of players, spectators, and the general public, to avoid mass attended events. Of that, there is no question. But as the coronavirus impact deepens in terms of health, socially, and economically, it is also fundamentally rewriting the sporting contract that underpins modern sport. As sport disappears from our TV screens, TV companies, who through broadcasting deals financially underwrite modern professional sport, particularly in Australia, are beginning to look again at their contracts and deals and take the view that because there is no sport to televise, they do not have to honour the contracts and monies they have promised to sport. Shorn of this key financial contribution, even the richest of Australian sports, AFL and NRL, have begun to cut back. 75% of staff laid off. Executives taking 25% and more in terms of cuts. An industry, albeit an insular sporting industry, devastated, as so many other industries are, by the immediate impact of the coronavirus. And what's fundamental now for sport is that even as it seeks tentatively to plan for a return, will key sponsors, will lucrative TV broadcasting deals be a thing of the past? Because either sponsors will not be available to the sport anymore or will not exist anymore, given the inevitable post-virus recession. Within this, there are certain key players, which are, of course, the players themselves. Players, through their union representatives, have negotiated with leagues such as the AFL and also with the NRL to take extensive cuts to their salaries. In some other sports, including football, players have simply been laid off, as with other staff, and as with workers throughout Australia, have had to and must avail of the various government initiatives with regard to JobKeeper schemes and related schemes. And when we do return, as tentatively sport plans to, the contracts that players have will effectively be renegotiated, not just in terms of play, but also in terms of length, if the season has to be extended. Sport is simply not used to this type of renegotiation in the context in which it is currently occurring. And we see that even at the highest level of global sport. There is little sympathy for the contractual obligations of elite professional players. At present, the English Premier League, one of the richest leagues in the world, is trying to negotiate a 20% cut with players. They are resisting, arguing that if the salary cut goes through, then the British taxpayer, the British exchequer, will be denied lucrative tax revenue that could be otherwise diverted to the National Health Service. And yet, from a general perspective, we look at the fact that the average weekly salary of a Premier League player is now 120,000 Australian dollars a week. That is twice the median pay annually of the average worker in Britain. Premier League players earn twice in a week what the average worker earns in a year in Britain. And it is that context, not just the public health context, but the perception that elite players are overpaid as it is, in which negotiations are now taking place in many sports worldwide. Even though we forget that elite players on elite payment schemes are a very small percentage of the sports industry itself. And it is that contractual matrix that is being discussed presently that will determine the future of sport. When sport returns, it's contractual, it's legal, but its playing landscape will be fundamentally altered. But if it does return, it will be, of course, a sign that some degree of normalcy is returning to our society. As ever with sport, sport matters entirely because in the large scheme of things, it doesn't matter at all.